back and Happy New Year, everyone. I am so excited that the Mandala Unplugged Stitch Along project is finally here, and I'm thrilled that you'll be stitching along with me. So just a couple things before we get started. If you're just joining us and you haven't gotten a supply list from me, you can go to my website at myhrequilts.com and get a general materials list and a few of the templates that we will be working on as we go along. The general materials list is just that. It is a general materials list. So go ahead and pick fabrics, threads, yarns, beads that you think that you may want to use in this project, and then just keep them all together in a basket or a pile, and that way each specific week that I give you the instructions and the materials for, you can just pick from that pile. There's no need to commit to a very specific set of materials or plans or any of that. We're going to just work as we go and stay in the moment and create in the week that we're in, and not worry about what it's going to look like, or can you do this, or any of that, because the answer is yes. The human eye loves symmetry, so whatever you decide to put in your piece, it's okay. It's going to look great because it's going to be repeated and it's going to coordinate with all of the rest of the things that you have going on. So, just gather your general materials, and each week I will be giving you specific materials, and then at the end of the videos I'll be giving you more materials, and for that week, and that way you can just kind of stay very current and no pre-planning. I'm not a big planner. For those of you who have my book and have read my book, Quilt is Inspired, that is how I operate. I just kind of have an idea or a vision, and I design as I go and I quilt as I go. So if you don't have this book, it's available on Amazon.com. If you're interested in working without a pattern, working with an inspiration or an idea, that'll give you a much more detailed version of what we'll be doing here. But at least in this 10-week video series, you'll get a little taste of how to just create something by staying current and working on just what you're working on and not worrying about the grand scheme of things. It's going to work. If you love being part of a stitch along group, then please consider joining our Facebook group called Mandala Unplugged, and that is a great place to post pictures, ask questions, comments. Maybe you're going to change things up. We'd all love to see that. We all want to see the colors that you've got going, and that's going to be the most fun of this project. If you don't do the Facebook, not to worry. You can also send me your own pictures that you've got going as you work, and comments and questions you can post to the comments below these videos. We'll all be working together in cyberspace. We can all just stay at home, some of us in our jammies, and still be connected with each other and stitch together. So that's really fun. And those of you who are not on Facebook, I will be taking some of those pictures, questions, and comments, and I'll be imposing them in the future videos so that you can see what others are doing, and that's going to be the fun part of this project. So I just can't wait. Even if you're still in the considering stage of this project, maybe you're on the fence, maybe you're a little nervous about it. There's a lot going on. There's some techniques that you might not be familiar with. That's okay. Still maybe just join the Facebook group. Get comfortable with the group. Today's part of the project is very simple, so you could just commit to doing today's, and then maybe if you're comfortable, you can go on to next week's. Today is a hand quilted, a big stitch quilt, so it's like a sashiko, like we did this last video. And we'll be doing some crochet, and I'll give you some alternate ways to make these leaves if you're not a crocheter. And if you're not a crocheter and you do want to learn, go back to November where I did a 4-part crochet video class, so that you can practice your crochet skills. So with that, let's get started on this week's beginning Mandala Unplugged. Okay, so what you're looking at here are the materials that you'll need just for this week. You'll need a background square of 18 inches and batting of 18 inches. In the materials list, I believe I said 20 inches, but go ahead and cut the batting down to match the front. The backing, use a 20 inch because we'll be folding the edges under eventually and basting them in place so we don't have a bunch of raw edges that we have to deal with while we stitch. We have the thread. This is a sulky 12 weight thread. Again, you can use quilting thread. And then the needle, the trick of the needle is to get the smallest needle you can find with the eye that is big enough for the thread that you're using. So, and a nice sturdy needle, because we'll be stitching a kind of a big stitch quilting to get this all in place. We'll need 8 safety pins, or regular pins is fine, and of course scissors. We're going to be crocheting leaves. So I'm using this cotton fine. If you're choosing a yarn, the gauge of this, make sure that it matches. It's 6.5 stitches per the inch on a knitting needle size 2. So if you can get a yarn that's close to this gauge, you should be fine. You don't have to use cotton. I just happen to love the juxtaposition of a matte on this sheen. I'm using a Radiance, Cotton Radiance by Robert Kaufman. And that is not essential. You can use whatever you want for your background. I would suggest, though, that it is a solid or a tone-on-tone background, not anything that's got any sort of pattern to it. Not that that wouldn't work, and you certainly could experiment with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if you're wanting the motifs to pop out, then you'll want a solid background. This is my backing fabric. It's just a regular quilting cotton. You can use whatever you want to. I would say stay away from tight weaves like batik, because we are going to be hand stitching through a lot of this stuff. Depending on what you're going to do with your quilt block, you will want to either choose something that you're going to stitch through. Like, I mounted mine. I put matte medium on my first one and I framed it. So I stitched on the back. It was a mess back there, and that's fine. If you're going to be using this in a quilt, you could always put a false bag on it, meaning you just would put another piece of cotton on the back and just stitch it in a couple places so it stays in place. So that would mean that what you choose for the back, just use something that you're not totally in love with, you know, just some scrap fabric, and make sure that that's 20 inches. So the first thing we're going to do, and this is almost how I always do every sort of quilt section, unit, block, whatever, I quilt it first and then I add the fun stuff. So we're going to start, this whole project is starting from the center out. So we got to find our center. Fold it in half, right sides together, and take your iron and just, you know, make sure that you've got the edges lined up. You're just going to press it so that you've got a crease here, and then you're going to fold it the other way so that you've got a crease going this way. So you'll have a big plus in your fabric, and that center point will be the middle. Then you're going to take your fabric and fold it once diagonally so that the corners match. Make sure that on the fold that little intersection there will be the center, and then you're going to fold it again, you know, press it with your iron, and then you're going to fold it again in the other direction. When you fold your piece, your initial fold, you know, you fold it in half and you iron your piece. When you fold the next one, you know, you're going to turn it over and fold it again. Make sure that these lines that you initially did right here, make sure that those match, so that when you're folding it in half again, you fold it in half, but make sure those lines match. So that way you have the plus sign. Now when you're going diagonally, that's really important as well. Get my batting out of here so you can see this better. Make sure that this line and this line, this line and this line match before you go and press it. All right? And that way when you press it, and then you've got your intersection here. And when you press, try not to press in here because you'll press out the lines that you've already done. Just press here and here. Fold it diagonally the other way. Same thing. Make sure that your original lines match each other. Fold it in half. Press out those sides, and then when you're done, this is your mark. At this point, you're going to layer your top onto batting, and then you're going to lay that on top of your backing fabric. Some of you may be wondering, well, why even put a backing fabric on at all and just you know, just do the top and the batting. And you certainly could do that. I think a lot of people do that. For me, though, the batting gets kind of dusty and linty, so I don't love that. So I just put on a backing. I just put on some random backing. You could do muslin even. You know, just whatever cheap backing you have, and that protects all of your work surfaces and their threads and everything from that linty dust that can happen with batting. This is how we're going to mark the quilt. We're actually not going to mark the background with any sort of chalk or pen, particularly if you're using Radiance. Now the Frixion pens, I think anyone who's been quilting knows that those Frixion pens are great. They mark your fabric and they come off with the heat of the iron. However, the residue does not go away, only the ink goes away. So on silk, the residue actually shows. So I never use Frixion pen unless I know it's going to be covered on Radiance fabric. Or particularly any dark fabric, the residue of the Frixion pen will stay. Ultimately, this is going to be a 16-inch finished block, so we've got lots of extra room on the ends because this is an 18-inch square. So what we'll want to do is make sure we know our boundaries, our 16-inch boundaries. So you've got your top with all of your lines on top of your batting, on top of the wrong side of your fabric, so that the right side is on the outside. And you've got an inch or so around. We'll be dealing with those in just a little bit. But for now, it's a good idea to know where your 16-inch boundary is. So the best thing to do, and this actually, what's so great about this too, is it makes sure that your fabric is laying straight. Lie a ruler along that center line, and if it's askew, pull your fabric to make sure that you can have this line coming from your intersection all the way up, all the way down, and make sure you look at all of your edges. Okay, then your 2-inch mark is on the line here, and then that 2-inch line follows all the way up to the top. All right, once you have that, place another ruler. These are 6-inch by 24-inch rulers alongside of that. And that way you'll have your perimeter here. So this is a Myhre marker. It's got a really great sharp little edge, and this is how we're going to mark this outside edge so we don't stitch beyond it, or it doesn't really matter if you stitch beyond it, but you want to make sure that you're not leaving anything short. Alright, so once you're sure that your center line is on that 2-inch mark, plus another 6 inches is 8, and we're going to do that on all 4 sides. So we have our boundary. Just take that marker and run it along the ruler. And that gives us that finished perimeter there. Alright, so just do that on all 4 sides, and that way this inside this box is where we're going to be putting all the fun stuff. And we will be basting these edges so that you won't be seeing this raw edge or this raw edge. And you may be wondering why we don't do that first, and that is because if you're a quilter already, you know that once if we were to baste this edge and there was extra here, all of our stitching would happen and you would have this extra business right here. So what we're going to do first is we're going to stitch out all these lines, and then we're going to go in and cover those raw edges and baste them so that we don't see them. And that way we've got a nice flat piece to work on for the duration. Once you've marked all of the sides, what you're looking for is you want those diagonal lines to meet up at the corner of those of the intersection between those drawn sides. And then you'll take your ruler and you'll measure, make sure it's 16 inches, you know, from here to here, and then 16 inches across, and just kind of measure in all places and just make 100% sure you're at 16 inches. The next thing that you're going to want to do is take a safety pin, and in each line, maybe, oh, I don't know, 6 inches from the center, just throw in a pin at each line, and that'll just keep us good and flat while we work from the center out. Okay. And you don't have to measure this, you know, just throw in a pin. We're just kind of keeping it all together while we stitch. We're going to be doing some hoop-free stitching in sashiko style. And what we're going for is 4 stitches to the inch or so. Rather than trying to get tiny stitches or perfect stitches, what we're looking for are just even stitches. Alrighty, so just cut, oh, I don't know, 18 inches to 24 inches. Piece of thread. Thread your needle. And then work a quilter's knot. And what that looks like is you take the needle in your hand and the end of the thread. Wow, that's hard to see. Let me get rid of this. And you wrap it 1, 2, 3 times. Put the wraps and the tail in your thumb. Hold it firmly while you pull the needle through. And then you've got that little perfect quilter's knot. Now, as far as stitching, we're going to come up right through the center of our wheel and then pick a horizontal or vertical line that you're going to work your stitching in. Again, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with this piece yet, but I am not going to worry about the back. I think it is easier and more fun to stitch this without having to worry about the back. So if I decide that I'm going to use this as a quilt, I'm going to put a false back on it, and we'll talk about that at the end of the project. So I guess what my suggestion would be is just throw some muslin on there and not worry about what the back is going to look like, because that's just one worry you just don't really need to even be putting on yourself. And all we're going to do now is follow the line, and as you go in, think 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch. All right. It's hard to see that, but that's how we're going to stitch in all the layers together. 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch. Now let's talk thimbles. We're not using a hoop here, which is kind of not normal, but with these big stitches, and we've pinned and we've marked, and it's just not essential. The 2 thimbles that I tend to use when I'm hand stitching is the under thimble. These things are so great. You know, so at first I don't tend to need a thimble, but as you go, then whatever finger you have underneath either one of these 2, and I switch off, you'll develop a callus there, and it doesn't feel great, you know, the needle constantly hitting your hand over and over again. So this little under thimble is like one of my favorite things of all time. It is just a little guy. It just sticks on your finger. So it comes with these dots, and I use these over and over again. So they're probably good once you peel off the backing. It's good for the next 10, 12 times you want to stitch. And then once it doesn't stick anymore, then just go ahead and put another dot on there. The paper on there is a little tricky to get off, so just use your needle to score it and then peel it off, and then it just sticks, which is really great. If you want to use a thimble on your right hand or your dominant hand, the hand that you're actually stitching with, this is a thimble by Roxanne, and it's nice because it can accommodate a fingernail, and it's super comfortable to wear. So you can see I use this a lot. I probably won't use it in big stitching, stab stitching, but when I'm hand piecing or I'm doing something really little, I will use this one. But for today, I'm just going to go ahead and use my under thimble. All right, so what you're going to do next is just go ahead and do all of the lines. My recommendation would be to start in the center every time, and I would finish out a line. So once I am done with this line here, you know, I work up to the pin, I'll remove the pin, smooth it out, and then just stitch to the end, knot it and end it. Then when you start your next thread, start it in the center and work this line. That way, once the half is stitched, you can smooth this out and smooth that out, this side out too. You're going to want to smooth everything as you go. So you can see I'm on my second line here. I started in the center and I'm going back along, and I just wanted to quick talk to you about this safety pin. Once you're up at that safety pin, remove the pin, smooth it out, and then just pop that pin right back in at the very end of the line, keeping everything in place. And then stitch to the end, and then I'll show you how to knot it. So I'm at the end, and I just wanted to show you how to work a quilter's knot to finish it. Just past the line, okay, and then how you end it is just take a little bite of the fabric right next to where you're exiting out of. Take the thread, 1, 2, 3. Hold those wraps against your fabric, and then pull up. And if you're trying not to have things show on the back, you can just insert your needle into it, just give it a little tug, just kind of bury that knot. So this is what your piece should look like when it's all stitched out, all 8 of those lines. And now we can deal with hiding some of these edges so that they don't fray. But just so you know, we will be doing some more background stitching. So don't put away your quilting thread or your pearl cotton, whatever you use to stitch this, just set that aside. We'll be going back to that another time. But this is good enough stitching to go ahead and be able to baste the edges so that we have some nice clean lines to work with. So all you're going to do is just take that excess fabric and butt the raw edge up against the batting or the top, and then fold it under. And as you can see, that doesn't reach to our 16-inch line, but that's okay. We're just really, our purpose is to hide these raw edges so that they don't fray as we work. Plus it looks really pretty. And grab a needle and thread and then just hand baste it in place. You could take big stitches, you know, 1/2-inch stitches, and just go all the way around your piece. And you can see I didn't pin it or anything. I'm just very loosely folding this up. Once you reach the corner, you just fold it, fold it, so the next little piece that we're going to do for this week is this leaf right here. It's not the applique. The applique we're going to work next week. That's going to be turned applique. but we're going to work the underneath part. You know, we're working in layers, background coming up. So this is a crochet, a little oval that we're calling a leaf. And obviously we're going to make 8 of them, and they go 1.5 inches from the center dot, stitched on to each line. So what if you don't crochet? What can you use instead? Here's an example of a leaf. And these will get stitched on. We're going to do that today. Okay, make sure we'll measure 1.5 inches. But if you don't want to crochet, you don't know how, you can cut a very similar shape out of wool. You can use any wool, you know, recycled wool, wool felt, doesn't matter. What we are looking at is a piece that's about, looks like 1 3/4 inch or so, and just at its widest point, maybe 3/4 inch. You know, pretty close. You don't have to be super exact, but you know, 1 3/4 by 3/4 inch wide, that'll get you something really similar. And that looks really cool. This is just out of some wool felt that I got at a quilt shop, and I can stitch that down. I don't have to turn the edges. The beads will be, you know, still great on there, and that'll look awesome. So you know, you can really do whatever you want to on there. You can knit even, you know, find a little pattern for a knit leaf. You certainly could do raw edge applique cotton. It doesn't matter. It's your piece, so you can just do whatever. I like to do lots of different techniques, so I crocheted this leaf, and that's what I want to show you next. And then again, if you want to learn crochet, and maybe you don't want to crochet on this, but you're thinking that maybe one day crochet would be good, that 4-part crochet series in November will really take you from the beginning to the end. So this is not a how-to crochet. This is for people that already know how to crochet, and we're going to just make a simple little leaf, all right? So we're going to start with a slip knot and about a 6-inch tail. And chain 11, loosely chain 11, don't go real tight here. Now again, I'm using a crochet hook C. You may have to adjust that depending on how you crochet and what yarn you're using. And make sure when you're done with this leaf, you measure it to make sure that it's in that same measurement, 1 3/4 by 3/4 at its widest. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11. All right, you know what, I'm going to scooch this camera in a little closer. All right, looking at the flat part of the chain, you're going to skip the first one and work 1 single crochet in the next, 1 half double in the next 2, and I'm going in that bottom chain so that I have 2 loops on the top. Another half double crochet, one double crochet in the next 3 chains, one, two, three, and then 1 half double crochet in the next 2 chains, and then a single crochet in the next. This will leave 1 chain left unworked. In that, you're going to work a slip stitch, kind of working over your tail. You're going to chain 1, and then that last chain is kind of hiding in there, so we're going to ignore that. That chain 1 is instead of going back into that. So we're going to come up on the other side and work a mirror image of what we've done. So that's hiding, we're going to ignore that. We've done our chain 1, and then you're going to just single crochet, 2 half doubles, and now in this case we've only got that one thread, but it's okay because we've anchored it with the stitches that we've done on the other side. Okay, half double, and then 1 double crochet in the next 3. 1, 2, 3, 2 half doubles, 1 in each of the next 2 chains, 1, 2, leaving that one last chain to work your single crochet. Now we want the top of this to be pointy, so I'll show you what to do. Right here you've got that first stitch, and there's 2 legs of that, right? You can see this kind of bump here. We're going to ignore that, and we're going to go into the stitch and work a slip stitch. So you're just going to grab your yarn and pull it all the way through. Hold on to your hook, take your scissor and just clip it here. Then lift your hook up and just pull tight. That gives that nice little point there, so that when we stitch it down, we've got a nice little point that sort of runs the line of our diagonal and our straight, because we're going to have 1 on each. So you're going to make 8 of those, or cut 8 of these. And you know, it's funny, I really love the look of this. So it's a little random piece of wool that I had that I cut the sleeve out of, and I like this plaid with my colors. You know, it's kind of, I'm doing this kit was called At the Beach. I know there are 3 others of you out there that are doing this colorway along with me, and I like the idea of this plaid being kind of a beach blanket or a towel or like the top of an umbrella or something. So somehow I am going to add this into the piece, and that was not planned at all. I literally just grabbed this out of my wool stash like 10 minutes ago. So that's how things can change, and I really think that's cool. So as far as stitching these on, we only need the 1 thread. This initial tail is we're going to thread the needle, and again, as far as needle size, make sure that you can find a needle that the yarn will go through that's small enough where it's not going to make crazy holes in your piece. So the front of the leaf, you can tell because it's got that divot line vein going up the middle. So all you're going to do is turn it around and just weave this guy, oh, I suppose halfway up. It really won't matter since we're going to stitch it onto the piece. And then you can just clip it. We'll use this end to sew the piece on. So again, we want to pin that in place while we sew, and we want to make sure that this is 1.5 inches. Yes, I have smaller rulers somewhere, but you know what, this is sitting right here, so we're going to just use this guy. Okay, so here's my 1.5, hits that center. The 1 is here. The bottom of that leaf will go right at the 1.5, and then the top. We'll pin it in place, and then we're going to stitch it on. And you know, this is, so whether you're using a crochet piece, a wool piece, cotton, whatever it is, just make sure that it always measures the same going all the way around. This is, oh, let's see, 1 and looks like 3/4, like we talked about. So make sure that when you pin it on and you sew it, it will go, you know, from your 1.5 inch start, you'll measure up 1 3/4, and that's where it's going to. All right, so to stitch this on, all you're going to do is insert the needle right at the point and come up through that stitch, the bottom of that stitch. So if you've crocheted, you can see you've got these little knit looking stitches. It's these bottom stitches that you're going to be sewing. Now if you want to use both of them because you don't want to see that other stitch, that's totally fine. If you've watched any of my videos and know how I operate, it's pick away and stay consistent, and that is key. That's all you really need to do to make this work. Now I'm going to go down right below this. So I'm not working over here, I'm directly under where this went. I'm not even pulling it into the back, really. I'm just working through the batting in the top, and I'm coming out in the middle of that stitch. You see that? So I'm just going to grab that little bottom part. And again, I'm going to go right underneath where it's coming out of. And I'm going to, let's get you a little stitch. I'm not working through the back, I'm just working through the batting in the top, and I'm coming right up in the middle of that stitch in the V, just so I can nail down that second layer here and up through there. All right, all the way around, and then that's all you sew that's how you sew the leaves on. It's good and stable, leaving yourself completely open to sew those beads on later, but we'll do the beads next week. If you are going to just do the wool, again, you'll measure the 1.5 inches, and you can just applique that on. You could do a blanket stitch around there. You can do exactly what I'm doing here. Let's see, I'll do a little demonstration of that. Get a little piece of yarn, come up through, the point, I suppose. Okay, and then maybe I would do something like, go down where the point is and come up 1/8 of an inch away. And then go down directly underneath where that is, pick up a piece of fabric, and I'm working, whatever you decide, whether it's 1/8, whether it's 1/4 of an inch, it doesn't really matter. Working down directly underneath it and then coming up through the batting, the top layer of the fabric, and just, that looks like about a 1/16 of an inch away from the edge of the leaf to sew that down. Looks just as good. All right, so however you decide, whatever motif you decide here, just make sure it is the sizes we've talked about, the 1 3/4 inch oval and 3/4 of an inch wide at its widest point. Cut 8 of them and then stitch them on just like we're doing here. All right, and for the end of this first part, you should have something that looks like this, the humble beginnings of our mandala. All of the leaves are stitched down regardless of whether you crocheted them or cut them out of wool or cotton or whatever. Don't worry so much. This is all done by hand, so we did our best to make sure that these are 1.5 inches apart from the center and that these are 1 3/4. This one is definitely longer, than, let's say, this one, just looking at it at first glance. So it's hand stitched, so it's not going to be totally perfect, and it's more interesting that way if things are just a little bit different. But at first glance, it looks great. And remember that on the bottom of these, we're going to be overlaying with applique. So next week, what you're going to want to get, if you're looking at the materials list, we're going to work with 2 fabrics, B and C. B is going to be the little similar shaped leaf that's going to go over, and then C is sort of the base, almost the like the bud of the flower. So those 2 fabrics, you want to make sure you have enough size 8 seed beads that will go around the leaf, and each leaf will get 17 seed beads, so that's 17 times 8. And in the materials list I said around 175 total, because we'll be using these beads later on, I think just to have some extra beads, it's always good, because you might throw those at the end of an embroidery or something. So make sure that you have beading thread, which is, this is called Nemo, and it's a waxed thread. It's not totally essential, since this is probably not going to get worn or used. If it is, then I would say maybe get this strong thread. It almost feels like dental floss. And then a beading needle. And then we're going to do some more background stitching, so of course have your original thread that you use to do all of this stitching. And we'll work on some turned applique and some bead stitch on fabric for next week. So I hope you've enjoyed this first part. It's not too bad, right? You can see where if you break down this project really simply, that it's actually quite manageable. So enjoy your day. Again, Happy New Year, and we will see you next Sunday for part 2 of Mandala Unplugged.